afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the TraderMerlin Show. It is your Thursday afternoon edition. Happy 420, everybody. I thought I'd have a glass of whiskey on the program, but instead I just took a giant bong rip. No, I'm kidding. I don't smoke anything anymore. My hippie years have gone with regards to cannabis. But happy 420 for all of you that are partaking in the festivities. If I get all kinds of weird messages in chat, I'll just assume that you're high. Our show today is going to be a little bit different. Obviously, I have a guest on the program today, which goes back, since 1998 is when I met this man. I met him in a parking lot, which sounds really kind of weird, but I was actually going to take a class at Online Trading Academy way back in June. It was actually May 20, April, May. I think it was the end of May 30th or 31st, because my class started June 1st in Irvine, California, and he was one of the guys that worked at Online Trading Academy, and that is Mr. John O'Donnell, who's going to talk to us today about what could replace the U.S. dollar as the world reserve currency. There's been a lot of talk about this, people freaking out, thinking that if a U.S. dollar loses its reserve currency status, they will all be, panhandling for change, and we'll just be the laughing stock of the world, and I think that's far-fetched. So let's start things off by a little bit of a greeting. Good afternoon, Mr. O'Donnell. Welcome back to the program. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great, Merlin. How are you?
I'm doing really good. I'm glad I could get you back on the program today. I mean, it's almost a very special day. I know that tomorrow is your birthday, so I'll just say a preemptive happy birthday to you today.
Hey, buddy, I'm 39 forever.
30, permanently locked at 39. Awesome. Well, I love having you on the program because you always bring some insights that maybe I don't look at and maybe not know about. For example, I didn't know squat about Keynesian or Austrian economics because I was taught Keynesian in school, and you opened my eyes to the whole Austrian economic world. So that's been a journey in itself. So thank you for that.
Well, I'm glad I was able to do that. You were difficult to get down the Austrian rabbit hole, but you finally got down it. And once you got down that Austrian rabbit hole, you found out there's a lot of wisdom down there.
It kind of ties into our discussion today. When you're taught or you utilize one thing, I was taught nothing but Keynesian economics in school. So here you are spewing off all kinds of Murray Rothbard and all different philosophers and economists that I've never heard of. Going, whatever, that's whack job stuff over there. Kind of like maybe switching from the U.S. dollar to a different currency. So once you understand things, and I think the beauty of being human is stepping back, listening to people's arguments, and wondering if maybe they present a better case than what you were taught before. So,
well, Austrian economics is all over that crypto story, and of course Hayek was really the first who wrote a paper on the denationalization of money. He always wanted competition in money. He was a big advocate of that in the 1940s. So this Satoshi's great, but let's give Hayek some credit too.
Yeah, Hayek actually puts a face to the name, whereas Satoshi still is a mystery as to who the heck that is. Let's start off broadly in understanding the cycles of world reserve currencies. So for those of you who may not know, there is a pattern to world reserve currency. And what we mean by world reserve currency is it's the currency that is the most significant. A lot of the products and services are traded using that currency. And from 1450 to 1580, is it 1580? 1530, sorry. You had Portugal. Spain was from 1530 to 1640. That was 110 years that they were the world's reserve currency. You had the Netherlands, the Dutch, for 80 years from 1640 to 1720 was the world reserve currency, which gave way to France. From 1720 to 1815, France was the reserve currency of the world. That was a 95-year run for the French. And then it went to Great Britain. So for 105 years, the Great British Pound was the reserve currency of the world. That's from 1850 to 1920. And lo and behold, in 1921 to 2023, where we are today at 102 years, the US dollar has been the world reserve currency. Now, based off those that I've told you, it really starts to look like about a 90-year history for a world reserve currency. We're all about patterns and what we do with trading and investing as well, so why not apply it to the history of a currency? Based off that, we are, as the world's reserve currency, the US dollar, a bit past the average historical length. And I guess it begs the question, John, is it time for the U.S. to lose its reserve currency status, or should it just keep on and break the mold of this 90-year mark?
Well, in the spirit of Friedrich Hayek, I also believe we need competition. And I don't think there's anything wrong for competition to carry the crown or of the king dollar days is showing some cracks in the plaster. Now, that doesn't mean overnight we're going to have economic Armageddon,
Right.
but we're starting to see evidence that other currencies, our central banks, are starting to step up and play a role, if not regionally, maybe first regionally, like, for instance, putting together trade areas like, for instance, Asia, perhaps Africa, perhaps South America, Middle East. Let's not forget that the Muslim population, and following the rules of the Quran, have always required for trade and commerce a gold-backed dirham. Then we've seen, of course, the euro spring up in 2000. I remember when Mike McMahon and I went to Europe for Online Trading Academy to do an event in Paris, and the exchange rate of the euro was 80 cents versus the US dollar. So could we see King Dollar toppled? I think it's a very real possibility. Now, the real question I think we need to talk about is, what could it be replaced by? Before we take something out as king of the hill, like we did, the U.S. took Great Britain out, what I believe is in 1944, around the Bretton Woods Agreement era. What could replace it? What would that look like?
Right.
I don't think it happens all at once, where you lose it on a Friday and you have a long weekend and a holiday period, and you wake up on Monday and all of a sudden King Dollar's fallen off the top of the hill like Humpty Dumpty. I don't see that happening.
Yeah.
But I think there's no question over the next decade, maybe two, we could see the dollar slowly, at first, and then how do crises come about? Well, they roll out slowly at first, and then all of a sudden there's a climactic period where it starts to accelerate, and we may be in that transition now.
Right. Let me ask you this: when we step back and look at the U.S. transition, it was because of wars, and I'm not a historian, so I haven't gone back to see why Portugal and Spain and Netherlands and France and have lost their world reserve currency status. But it would appear to me that it's generally the result of a conflict where the victor says, "Hey, you're using our currency. If you don't like it, we'll keep kicking your ass." And I guess my question, before we say what could replace the dollar, is more of a question of, why would we lose reserve currency status, right? There needs to be something that happens that causes global community to go, you know what, forget the dollar. In the case of the British pound back in 1921, okay, forget the British pound, we're moving over to the US dollar. What, in your opinion, might be a catalyst that would cause this transition away from the dollar to something that we'll get to in a second, some other currency?
Well, let's take a look at Great Britain. The most current one that's probably we can all relate to, especially people my age.
I was gonna say a little before my time, buddy. A little bit before my time.
Well, I was born in 1946, so I would like to say, hell, I was the catalyst for Great Britain to lose their status. But Britain lost their status primarily because of their war debts from World War I and World War II. Europe was absolutely, the productivity of Western Europe during World War II was absolutely destroyed. As you can imagine, you've seen the film clips of what that looked like. But Great Britain was deeply in debt. And back in the day, there were, what the exchange rate of sterling is today. I believe it's around $1.10, $1.11, something like that. It used to be, it was £5 to the dollar.
Yeah,
so
you're at $1.24 today. A British pound.
Yeah,
British
well,
pound.
what do you think the world was like when it was $5 to sterling
crazy
to the dollar?
Yep.
I mean, think about that on a relative basis. And of course, they had a fantastic inflation. I believe it was from 1936 until about 2005, something like that. In Great Britain, it was 5,000% inflation after they lost the reserve currency status. Previous to that era, for 200 years, inflation in Great Britain was only 1% a year. So, first of all, if you have reserve currency status, It generally reflects that the world wants to own or do trade and make settlement in that currency. The central bank of the currency of the country wants to hold that dollar-denominated debt as a reserve in their central bank, because there was a time up until 1971 where that was convertible into gold if you were a central bank, and of course that blew up with Mr. Nixon. Mr. Nixon took us off the gold standard in August of 1971, and that was primarily because of our war debts in the Vietnam War. People kind of forget about how much money we were spending to finance that war. And France called Nixon's bluff, and I believe it was de Gaulle, Charles de Gaulle, that sent the warships over to New York to pick up his gold.
Yeah.
And they didn't have it readily available. They had to go dig it up from wherever they had it hidden. And eventually they got their gold back.
Big Eb says, why did we go off the gold standard under Nixon? I think that part of it was, at least from my understanding, it somewhat handcuffed the government from a printing perspective, because if you're required to hold a certain amount of gold, your currency is backed by a certain amount of gold, you can't go out there and just print $15 trillion like we just did. Imagine if the US dollar had a gold standard right now. If you go to what we did from 2020 to today, we printed roughly $15 trillion worth of currency in just a few months. You would have to technically buy enough gold to back all that, but you don't have any money to buy gold. You're using this money to pay for war debt. So I think the large portion of it was that it handcuffed the government from a money printing perspective. Am I wrong?
Well, that was the Keynesian. That's what the Keynesians put out. John Maynard Keynes brought that to the forefront, and that was his excuse for having what we call the benefits of an elastic currency supply. In essence, he wanted a license. The Keynesians wanted a license to run deficits and print money. Now, what you could have done is let the price of gold float. There's no reason. Murray Rothbard has written a great book on this. I would refer to your audience. You could get it on Google. I read this book back in 1970. It's called "What Has Government Done to Our Money?" And if you'll read Murray Rothbard's booklet, you can get it on Amazon for $5 or $6. It's a wonderful history of this period, and look at why we should have floated the price of gold, and we wouldn't have had that problem and we don't need to continually print money. If you printed another $1 trillion, that doesn't really increase your wealth. All it really does is dilute the currency stock that's already been issued, and you dilute the milk, and it loses its flavor. And that's the Austrian perspective. So the Austrians and the Keynesians had this debate going back with Ludwig von Mises, going with the Haute Austrian school that was invented at the University of Vienna in the 1760s. And here we are today, and everything the Austrians predicted has come true. And here we are today with $30 trillion of debt.
Yeah,
and much more than what nobody ever seems to want to talk about, Merlin, is our unfunded liabilities out there of things like Social Security and Medicare.
Yeah. I just posted a link into chat, and that is the book that John mentioned. It's called What Has Government Done to Our Money? There are a ton of great books and resources for free. Mises Institute, just go to Mises.org. You can get the PDF there for free. But if you want the hard copy book, you can go to Amazon and grab that book there, no problem. But
it's a great read. It's written for the layman. You don't have to be a PhD in economics to understand it. Murray Rothbard was, in fact, my mentor and turned me on to this. I got involved in gold when it was about $45 an ounce.
Yeah. Well.
I just, like everybody else, I didn't have the resources to buy a lot of ounces, but I bought it all kind of could afford.
So were you out here in California mining gold at that moment in time? You're way back in the gold rush days, John?
No, Merlin, I didn't get to California till 1978, but and of course, when I got to California, gold had gone from $45 to $800 in 2000. When I first met you, gold went from $850 down to about 230 an ounce. So I've been in gold. There's been periods of time where the price volatility of gold has exceeded that of Bitcoin.
No.
A lot of people,
Yeah.
you have to go back. You have to go back. You have to go back some years to see that. But we've seen some radical price movements in the price of gold.
We have, and we will continue to see it. We'll discuss when we get to the, what could replace the dollar here in just a second. But I want to share this graphic here. If you go to usdebtclock.org, it's a fantastic. It's actually as depressing as hell. Honestly, it is really depressing when you look at this and understand how much debt is there. Right now, we're running at $94,000 of debt per citizen, $247,000 of debt per taxpayer. That is absolutely insane. And then you look down here at the bottom. Here's that unfunded liabilities that John had talked about. You can see Social Security, you got Medicare, and then unfunded liabilities. That's $186 trillion.
Yes.
That to me ushers in another problem. And when I asked about, what could cause people to look at a currency and say you're no longer the reserve currency of the world, my hypothesis is it's probably not going to be a global conflict where the victor says we're using our currency. I just don't. I think we're past that as a society. But you never know. Yeah, what's going on with Russia? You never know. I think what's going to end up happening is at some point the U.S. is going to default on its debt. And I know you're going to go, no, they'll just keep printing to infinity. I think there'll come a point when you just can't keep printing that much, and the people who are buying our debt will look at it and go, you know what, we're not going to buy that anymore. And we will default on our debt. We're already just ridiculous amount of debt as it is. And when that happens, then I think the world collectively is going to say, okay, let's look for another alternative to the US dollar. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a real possibility. Again, I don't think that's going to happen overnight.
Of course not.
But you can imagine. The currency game, the fiat currency game, as developed and managed by the Bank for International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland, is basically a confidence game. Think about the reserves you want to hold. Do you have any confidence in owning Chinese bonds issued by the Chinese government, even though you'd like maybe, you play in the foreign currency market?
John, just to be honest, I don't even, when I share at the end of every show, I share an economic calendar, earnings calendar, so that everybody here knows, hey, here's what's coming up for tomorrow. These viewers have never seen me show Chinese economic data, just because I don't even trust the data being reported, let alone go out and buy Chinese bonds. So your answer to that one is hell no.
See, that's a confidence game. You have no confidence in the credibility of the data coming out of the Chinese government. Not only that, but you probably don't have a lot of confidence in their solvency. You don't have a lot of confidence in that you can believe in their promises. A credit instrument is a promise.
Right, that's it is.
Now let me ask you another question. Do you hold any Venezuelan debt, government debt in your portfolio?
I do not hold any Venezuelan debt in my portfolio.
Okay.
And you're right, it's a crisis of confidence or trust in those countries to pay. Remember, for everybody here, when you buy a bond, you are making a loan. You are being the lender. You're lending that government or that entity money, and they're paying you interest on it.
Would you own, Russia has considered issuing some gold-backed notes. Russia has a history of defaulting on debt going all the way back to the Tsars, 1919. Mm-hmm. But, I wouldn't want to own Russian debt in my portfolio. If I were a pension plan, if I were running the pension plan of the Orange County, California Teachers Union, they broadly diversify their exposure. But those financial institutions, they're not buying these credit instruments of these countries. Mexico, mm-hmm. You want to own some Mexican peso denominated debt? I don't.
I'd rather own Mexico than China or Russia.
I would. And why is that? Because if we had a geopolitical challenge where we had to go force it and we had to go take an action militarily to take over the central bank gold reserves of Mexico in Mexico City, we could do that. Right. But we can't do that with Russia. We're not going to do that in China. They got they got missiles too, sitting there protecting their asset base. But on the other hand, Venezuela, I don't want any of that. And let's talk about Cuban debt. Do you want to own any Cuban debt written by, Fidel Castro's
Hey, if
brother?
they pay interest in rum and sugar, I might go for that. I don't want to. I trust the rum and
Well,
sugar.
maybe in what, 6 month bonds. So,
Yeah, right.
so the point is, what could happen to cause the dollar to lose king dollar status, is confidence.
Yeah.
And where does that start? That starts with leadership. And the leadership position of America right now, and I don't want to be political about this, but let's face it, it's not in good stead.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Let me throw a hypothetical out there at you, and this is you and I talked about this the other day, and this is kind of the viewpoint that I have. Number one, I think that what could cause this is the U.S. just defaulting on their debt, or some economic issue that makes the rest of the world go, "Hey, we don't need anything to do with the U.S. dollar." So once that happens, I'm going to set an analogy here, and then I'll relate it back to our discussion, and that is, you've got 10 kids, and these kids, they always hang out, but Timmy is the big bully on the block, and everybody knows Timmy, and the other 9 kids are terrified. So if Timmy says jump, those 9 kids do it. And at a certain point, it's the show run by Timmy. In this case, let's make Timmy the United States of America. And we are the global police force, the global bully. We are the biggest economy in the world, but that's changing as we speak. So the U.S. is Timmy in this example. And the other 9 kids all respect, not necessarily respect, but do what Timmy says. At a certain point, Timmy can kick the living daylights out of any one of those 9 kids. However, if 5 of those kids band together and say, screw Timmy, the 5 of us will band together and rebel against Timmy. And let's say that those five kids are China, Russia, Saudi Arabia, India, and all of a sudden, Timmy no longer has that power because those 5 kids collectively could kick Timmy's ass. And I think if we look at, what could replace the reserve currency, I don't believe that it's going to be definitively the ruble or the yuan or the Saudi Arabian currency. I think what's going to happen is you're going to get this collection of this group of kids, the countries that get together and say, all right, Russia, China, Saudi Arabia, India get together and go, you know what? We're all attached to each other. We're technically neighbors here. So why don't we either create something or we agree that it's going to be this currency? So if someone wants to buy oil from Russia or oil from Saudi Arabia, you're going to have to use this currency and force everybody to do that. What am I out of line thinking that sort of collusion could potentially create this reserve currency that moves away from the dollar?
Isn't that exactly what we did with the Bretton Woods Agreement? We were the victor in World War II. Western Europe and UK were riddled with debt and devastation of their productive base. Isn't that exactly what we did with the Bretton Woods Agreement?
Yeah.
And basically, the Bretton Woods Agreement was everybody got together and agreed that they still needed to be on kind of a pseudo gold standard. They agreed to accept dollars because we had all the gold reserves. I mean, figuratively speaking, and that the dollar was convertible into gold at about $20 an ounce at that time. And then we reneged on that. Roosevelt devalued the dollar almost 40%. So we defaulted on the Bretton Woods Agreement, but so we kind of screwed them, and then the rest is history. But I've always thought for a long time along your theme is that countries would come together in a trading bloc. Remember, the role of a currency is to make trade. The role of money is to be a medium of exchange, a store of value, and a unit of account. So the role of money as a currency is to facilitate trade settlement in something you have confidence in. Right. And you have confidence in it because, if you had to take a partner's euros as an example, that you can take those euros and go down and buy oil, make settlement for your oil with Saudi Arabia. Now, that has some challenges because Saudi Arabia under Nixon's agreement, made an agreement that they would settle all oil purchases in dollars. And of course, that agreement has cracks in the plaster right now.
Yep.
So could we have an Asian trade region that's kind of dominated with yuan? Yeah, I think so. We'd have to think about Indonesia because that's basically a Muslim country. Japan is not have good feelings about the Chinese
Saying
because
so.
because they riddled them and
Yeah.
just absolutely, the war crimes in that particular situation were worse than the Holocaust, according to some records. That being said, could the yuan dominate Asian trade region? Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Could there be a South American trade region? They could come up with a currency. They could, come up with their own BIS, Bank for International Settlements. Their central bankers get together and come up with an agreement on a currency and wave the flag for that one. Europe's pretty well taken care of with the euro, although
Although it
Eastern
has
Europe
problems, that has some stresses on it too. I mean, now
sure does.
The UK leaving, that was a big issue there, and it shows cracks in the, I guess I don't know what I would say here, the cracks in the ability for a group of countries to get together. And, many people have been talking about the BRICS, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, India, of course. Yeah, you got your BRICS countries, if there was by some crazy means that they went to one standardized currency, I think we'd be having a totally different discussion, although I don't think that that's going to work specifically because a lot of those countries are in different continents. That's going to make it very difficult to have the same currency.
And culture. Don't forget culture plays into this too. Okay, it isn't just financial. There's a cultural bias there. Europeans are Europeans. I mean, you lived in Europe. You lived in Italy.
Yep.
You know that Europeans are different culturally than Americans on a lot of things. Same thing with the Middle East. You and I both spent some time in Dubai working in financial literacy work, and it became very close to me. If you look at Dubai, how many people in Dubai are even from that the Indians did a lot of trade with Singapore. When I went to Singapore and Dubai, I found that there's a lot of people from Dubai that are doing business in Singapore. The oil situation, dollars for oil, but Russia has the ability to fulfill some of that oil. I think America, if it were left alone and oil wasn't such a political stranglehold right now by the climate agenda, that America could easily be self-sufficient in oil, or certainly we could get all the oil we need out of Canada and Mexico. And between those three regions' production, it wouldn't be difficult for us to handle that.
And we may even, I think I mentioned this before, I believe the numbers are something like the U.S. consumes, I believe, 16 million barrels, or sorry, we consume 21 million barrels a day of oil in the United States, and we produce 16 million. So there would be a shortfall there, but you're right, we could get it maybe from Canada, we maybe get it from Mexico, but we could also offer some incentives, some government incentives to start increasing production in the United States and get even more out of ours because we have
Merlin, we get it from North Dakota and Texas.
That's what I'm saying.
Plenty of oil in this country.
Yeah.
I mean, we just need to get the EPA off the back. We need to drill, baby, drill.
Yeah.
Is what we need to do. We can produce oil. We can be self-sufficient, and that would be good. That'd create a lot of jobs in America. And I don't want to send our dollars over to Saudi Arabia. I have a problem with that.
Me too.
And let's do it right here if we can.
So,
let's talk about the Muslim region for a moment.
Yeah. Let's do it.
The Quran is a big, serious advocate for gold in trade of settlement or a gold-backed currency. Well, that would take care of all the Muslims in the Middle East, and that would take care of the Muslim affinity from Indonesia. So, there could very easily be, a Saudi-based, gold-based currency, or Dubai could come out with one, or Iraq, or I don't know about Iran. They need to get their act cleaned up a little bit. But there's no reason that region of the world can't have a very strong currency. Now, I want to go back to what Hayek said.
Hold on, before you go to what Hayek said, keep that thought. I want to go back to what Hayek said, but I want to show this chart here real quick to everybody, just to put it in perspective. This is a map, and I'm not sure what the date on this one is, but this is a map showing the Muslim population around the world, and you can see that Northern Africa is almost all Muslim. You got a lot, obviously, through the peninsula, the Mideast Peninsula here, heavy as well. So there's a huge population around the world. And you brought up something interesting on the conversation with me the other day, which was, they want to create their own currency. And I want to steal your thunder because you were just going to go down to the Quran and kind of what in Muslim countries, the currency has to be what? Backed by?
Gold.
So some of you were asking about a gold standard. What, and this is hypothetical. Again, we're spitballing here because no one knows what the future holds, but what if all those countries, and again, that's a very poor part of the country, poor part of the world is Northern Africa here. Africa is not exactly huge amounts of capital, but they have a large population. You have a lot of oil and resources here in the Middle East. They could get together and create a currency. Then they say, okay, like the euro, we'll come up with a standardized currency that is designed to be backed by gold. And, if that happened, I think that would change perspective of that currency because it's actually backed by gold. That would be very, very interesting to me.
That'd be very interesting, and it'd probably be those Wall Street and London firms that specialize in global management of assets for retirees and high net worth individuals might want to buy some of those sovereign bonds that are, secured by gold.
If you trust that the gold is there, that's the trust part.
Well, they obviously would have to come up with some procedure to verify that. Maybe the gold would be like, we'd have to come up with a place to warehouse the gold, probably in Switzerland, and you'd have a gold warehouse receipt. Still the biggest physical gold market is in Geneva and Zurich.
Yeah, but see, here I'm going to play devil's advocate here, John, because I'm a person that when I was teaching university, my students gave me a phrase that says "non mi fido di nessuno," and that means I don't trust anybody. I hear about XYZ Central Bank and Fort Knox and all these places have massive gold reserves. I call bullshit because I don't see it. I don't touch it. Now, I say that because I saw something really, really cool at a trade show a couple years back, and it was basically a blockchain gold, and you would get your public address, and that public address, if you keyed it in to this software, it would actually take the camera from their facility and scroll by and show you your physical bar of gold or coins with a camera. So it was like a fully auditable storage unit where you could see and trust and verify that. Otherwise, I don't trust that the gold's there.
That's the technology that Saudi Arabia could use,
Yeah.
or Dubai, or India. Right. India is a huge gold buyer. And that could happen. I mean, if you could have that kind of technology, I might even want to consider I have to reconsider, would I want to own a Chinese bond that's backed? Would I want to own a credit instrument from Russia backed with gold? As long as they're, I could lay my hands on the gold, or at least have some confidence again. That word confidence keeps coming up. But I want to get back to what Hayek said. First of all, he says, I don't believe that any one currency ought to dominate anything. I think Hayek said there ought to be competition.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. I mean, look up the denationalization of money. There's no reason that money needs to be dominated and issued by the state. And that brings us to our Bitcoin conversation and the crypto conversation. I think Bitcoin specifically, perhaps others, of credibility, once we get past some of the politicalization in the crypto space that's going on right now. But I think cryptos are going to play a big role in becoming a reserve asset that can play a part in this currency game. And that doesn't mean that we're going to get rid of the dollar and throw it away. It means that it means that central banks could start using, I think the BIS in Switzerland has denominated now that banks can hold 1% of their assets in Bitcoin.
Yeah, there's a structure. Yeah, I think they can get up to 2%, but there's tiers of which crypto they could hold. And this would be one.
That's cool. That's a start.
It's a start, but this creates something that has never been done before, and that is a 100% audited track record of somebody's holding. So let's go to, I obviously wouldn't be the Muslim one because it's going to be backed by gold. But what if we had, let's say, I'm just throwing this out there in a horrible way, but let's say El Salvador says our currency is now backed by Bitcoin, right? And of course they allow Bitcoin there as legal tender, but let's say they create their own currency and it's now backed by Bitcoin, and you would have a wallet address so you could see exactly how much Bitcoin is sitting in that address because it's on the blockchain, 100% accountable with no theft or piracy or manipulation of that data. It would usher in a whole era of trust with regards to central banks and their holdings, and therefore the value of that currency. Because, like, again, if we come up with some Muslim currency that's backed by gold, my heart's going to tell me don't trust it because I don't know that gold is there. If they were backed by Bitcoin, I would know 100% that the Bitcoin is there. It's a totally different ballgame.
If you had your camera program where you had, there's a way to do some auditing to get over that credibility hump. Because I know you trust nobody, but you trust the Bitcoin code.
I do.
Okay. But you trust the Bitcoin code. But there are other codes that are out there that can be diluted quite easily at proof of stake code.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay. So, but it isn't a perfect game. It's like, how do you know the gold's at Fort Knox?
I don't.
And even if it is at Fort Knox, Merlin, how do you know it hadn't been hypothecated?
So the one thing I did when I was in college, I was in this financial management club, and we went to the Mint in San Francisco, and they took us down into the bowels of the Mint, which was actually I didn't realize that whole tower is on rollers. It moves back and forth for earthquakes, which is crazy. But they brought us to this one door, which was 5-inch thick steel bars, and it's just crazy security. And in one corner of that room, from floor to ceiling, was the 400-ounce bars of gold. That was probably one of the coolest things. It was tens of millions of dollars worth of gold just in there. That was really, really cool. Probably hundreds of millions of dollars. But other than that, I don't trust it.
How do you know it hadn't been hypothecated?
How do you know it's not a bar of lead dipped in gold?
I mean, we go down that rabbit hole on credibility.
Absolutely.
It's not like our U.S. government or the Federal Reserve System wants to give us an audit. We don't even audit and publish a public of the Federal Reserve System. I mean, think about that. What other $30 trillion public-facing institution do you know of that must withstand some kind of public accounting?
Yeah, makes you wonder what the hell's going on over there. So a couple things. Number one, we talked about there's the potential for a reserve currency going to Bitcoin. I personally don't think that will happen, and the main reason for that is it's outside of government control. The reserve currency gives whoever is the reserve currency power, and it's given the U.S. tremendous power for the past 100 years. So I don't see it going to a decentralized network like Bitcoin unless the masses, you and me, make that happen and say, hey, we're using this and ultimately push it that way. But I don't think that would happen. Ganesh said something earlier, which I think is really important, and I think you mentioned this as well. Instead of saying, hey, I trust the yuan, which I absolutely do not trust the yuan or the manipulation that goes on with that currency, and I don't trust the ruble and the manipulation goes on there, but a basket of securities almost seems to make more sense as the world reserve currency. Now, again, that would take some power away from each of those governments that's in there, but at least as a global community, you could look at it and say, all right, I'm minimizing the risks of manipulation by each of those respective governments because those currencies is in a basket, kind of like the dollar index, right, which is predominantly the euro.
Well, are like what because the IMF or the World Bank issued SDRs, special drawing rights, and that was a basket of currencies. But I think a basket of currency is better than one, to tell you the truth.
I agree.
I mean, although you still got the politics of whoever is the leading representative of each one of those government issued currencies.
Right.
I trust Bitcoin. I mean, I trust the Austrian approach more than the Keynesian approach. See, the rabbit hole you keep going down is the the Keynesian approach, consider the Austrian solution. The Austrian solution is competition, free competition, and that there's no reason. When you read this book, What Has Government Done to Our Money by Murray Rothbard, you will come to the conclusion that Murray comes to in this book, is that we don't need a government-issued currency. The market, the users of the currency, need to determine what they're going to use, and they need to have freedom of choice to do that.
And while I respect that, and it makes sense, I can't imagine governments
wanting to give up their monopoly. I understand what you're saying.
That's war. I mean, and you can see it happening here in the United States, which is them shutting down the on-ramps into cryptocurrencies and digital assets, because I think that they're smart enough to realize that crypto, like Bitcoin was created so you could be your own bank. Now you move away from the banking system. We have all kinds of problems there for bankers. Oh, sorry, Jamie Dimon, you might lose business. I'm not crying a tear for you, buddy.
Well, remember what Satoshi was talking about was a peer-to-peer system.
Correct.
That if you wanted to send me some sats and I wanted to send you some sats, and we can agree upon how many sats you're going to pay me for this presentation today, we're in good shape. All right. It's a free market. That's what free market's about. We don't need the government to decide that. We don't, we just need to know that we can make, we used to talk about money in some of the lectures I gave at OTA, and I used to talk about what do they use for money in prison? The market they use cigarettes. It's one of the most popular money instruments in prison? Postage stamps, right? Think about it. Postage stamps have greater utility in a prison environment than they do outside of a prison, because you need to send a letter to mom, but the bottom line is the market will determine what they're going to accept as a medium of exchange.
Right. And that's exactly, it's funny, you mentioned that earlier, and Margaret says it right here. She says, the reserve currency will be the one that countries want to park their money at. And why would they do that, Margaret? Because they trust it. And we might look at it as this is the one that's the least evil of the countries where we park our money at. But at a certain point, right now, the U.S., most people trust that they'll get paid and their money is safe. But if that trust is broken, which is why I keep thinking the debt is going to be an issue, because if we break that, then no one will trust us anymore. Then people will find another place to park their capital and use that one as a reserve currency. So, we don't know just.
However, let's talk about this. What if the dollar did lose its status as a world reserve currency? What would America look like? If we follow the Great Britain example, it's going to look like chaos. The exchange rate is going to go to hell in a handbasket. You're going to see inflation go crazy, and the bond market, which I believe is the most informed print there is in the world about what's going on. You're going to see a real credibility crisis, because who's going to fill that political void? Who's going to fill that void if the dollar can no longer be considered a safe asset?
Right.
I think
if we step back and look at what it might look like for us, and most people here are in the U.S., so we can speak to most people. I know we've got some people from international, but from the U.S. perspective, if we lost the reserve currency status of the world, you're right, there would be several actions that would happen right away. Our markets would go to chaos because we're no longer the reserve currency of the world, meaning people out there no longer have to have dollars. So what you would have is bondholders in countries that have mass holdings of U.S. dollars because of trade, that they need to use dollars to buy gold or silver or oil, these different commodities priced in dollars. They no longer need those dollars. They would start unloading that. So your dollar chart would just be plummeting and flooding the market with currency. That would cause inflation out there. It would be bad for a while, but it's not going to be this apocalyptic scene that I think a lot of people are portraying as. We will certainly adapt and recover and stabilize, but it's going to be a discovery process of, okay, how do we deal with this new marketplace where our U.S. government may have to hold the currency of whatever country is the reserve currency so we can buy oil and gold and silver.
Well, same thing happened with Great Britain. When Great Britain lost their, pound sterling as a reserve currency of the world status, they adapted, and we will adapt, but we'll adapt in a very chaotic period. And that may give rise, that chaos and uncertainty really may give a boost to Bitcoin in that environment. But how long is this going to take, Merlin? I mean, it's we've got to get past. I think you said the other day we can't wait until fourth quarter of 2005 because of the halving.
Yep.
But how long is this going to take? Going to take? I mean, is in my lifetime will I live to see no longer a king dollar?
I think you will. I think you will. So here you already have, Saudi Arabia accepting the yuan for oil. That's the first kind of shot across the bow. And you brought up the point when we talked the other day. You said, well, why would Saudi Arabia even want to accept the yuan? Because they're buying goods and services from China. So, okay, I'm doing that anyway. Fine, I have your currency. It makes it easier for me than trying to go to dollars, convert those dollars to yuan, suffer on the exchange rate. So it's actually better for Saudi Arabia, since they're doing business in China, to do it to trade in yuan. Of course, you have to trust China and the valuation of the currency. But you're already starting to see, BRICS countries saying, hey, we'll take payments in different currencies when it used to just be the dollar. And what I think you'll see happen is over the next 3, 4, 5 years, there will be more of, as you put it, choice. And these countries will say, you know what, we were kind of forced to use the dollar, but hey, I'm okay using the Brazilian real for this coffee. I'm okay using this ruble for lumber that I'm getting from, Russia. And those currencies may start to gain a little bit of strength, maybe even a little bit of stability and trust going forward. And maybe, 10 years down the road, we see that transition. I think there's two options. A slow transition, which would be what I just mentioned, or we go into some crazy black swan event, a global war, or the U.S. devaluing their currency and defaulting on their debt. Those two things, I think, would instantly create a new reserve currency. Someone else would choose it, or we have a slow progress. And I don't know which way it's going to go. I kind of hope it's a slow process, not some violent action.
I think you're right. I think it probably will be a slow process. What has precipitated this conversation around the world, not just with us, but when Biden decided to weaponize the dollar against Russia because Russia invaded their neighbor, this kind of set off this conversation.
Yep.
And it set Putin on a course, to give us one half the peace symbol and go over and start looking for alternatives to adapt to the weaponization of the dollar. And other countries started to look at this. Oh, wait a minute. If we got into a political brouhaha with the U.S. on some particular issue, they could cut us out of the SWIFT system, right, which is what we did, and we have to talk about what the hell's the SWIFT system going to look like in a multi-currency world like we're speculating on. That's going to have to change. That probably will have to be replaced because the SWIFT system as we know it is all dollar based for all practical purposes. And so what did that do? Well, that Putin decided to go have a conversation with China. And then all of a sudden they're talking with, he doesn't need to, isn't China buying Russian oil or swapping some other precious commodity like lithium? Lithium's going to have, and copper are going to have a big role to play. Matter of fact, I think copper is going to have a bigger role to play in this electrification of transportation as we know it today than lithium. Copper is a very, very important commodity. Mm-hmm. And I think I'm long copper. I'm talking my book now when I'm saying this, but I'm really, really excited about copper. So what are we going to do? Are we going to continue to weaponize the dollar? Are we going to go down that political road? I mean, is that what we're going to do? Are we that bully that you're talking about? Is that what motivated the 6 kids to gang up on the bully metaphor that you had talked about earlier? Are we being a bully by weaponizing the dollar? And I would say, yeah, we probably are.
Yeah. I think we have been for decades, and I think that most here would probably look at it and say, yeah, the U.S. has been the bully in the world for the longest time, and that's what's afforded us to be one of the biggest, most powerful countries in the world. Not to say it's not the great people and great innovation and things like that, but there will be this ebb and flow over time, and I don't know which way it's going to go. I guess the question that many people are asking here, someone was asking, how do you buy physical silver? you could go to a ton of different sources and buy physical silver or gold, whether it's a coin store. There's companies online you can buy bars of gold and silver, which is one way to get it. But what would be, from your perspective, let's assume that this is a 10-year process where we transition away from the dollar into something else. What would be your play to kind of protect yourself or hedge a little bit about the change in the reserve currency from the dollar?
Well, I've told you that my biggest position right now in my personal investment funds is Bitcoin. I'm also I've been long gold for forever, it seems like. I also am long copper through the copper producers. And there are several of them. There's some great copper. Freeport McMoran is probably one of the best in the world.
Yep, a little
Uh,
FCX.
I've been long silver through SLV. I'm also long silver through the silver mining royalty companies. And so if I want to do gold, but it's
Is that like
gold.
what, Franco-Nevada?
Franco Nevada's a good one. Also, oh, it's on the top of my tip of my tongue.
No, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. I knew.
It's Wheaton.
Wheaton.
Wheaton Precious Metals. That's probably the best one. Franco Nevada is behind that.
Ticker symbols
But
WPM for Wheaton and
yeah, Wheaton. I'm long gold through the gold mining shares, NEM, Newmont. Although I'm also looking at taking a position in a Nico Eagle. Nico Eagle.
New to
They
me.
just, yeah, they're a good company. AGNICO Eagle is the name of the company.
Oh yeah, there you go. Ticker symbol for that is AEM.
Yeah, they're a good company. Of course, the biggest gold producer in the world right now is Newmont. I mean, they're
Yeah.
they're very strong in that
All
category.
right. So gold
I
miners,
think
physical gold and silver, and Bitcoin.
I truly believe that Bitcoin is digital gold. I mean, at this part of its development, even with its volatility, I believe there's no question in my mind that it's the equivalent of digital gold and has many characteristics better than gold.
Yeah.
For what we have for the risk and reward potentials that we have in front of us. Even at this price. I mean, I know it's been quite volatile, but you know, I don't think $30,000 Bitcoin is a ridiculous price.
Yeah. No, I mean, well, 28 today, but I don't even think, $100,000 or $200,000 Bitcoin is a ridiculous price. If you look at utility and it starts becoming more utilized around the world, it would make sense. But we're not there on the adoption front yet. I think it's definitely a few years away from getting to the point of using this for transactions and getting Bitcoin mainstream. But very few people are using it right now. And at some point, we may get to the point where it's very utilized, and then its utility goes up exponentially. But that's an expectation. That's having to wait on that specific crypto to
I'm trying to get more knowledgeable about the level 2 Lightning specifically. And I'm working on that, but I'm cautiously optimistic on what Lightning is going to accelerate adoption all across the world. And
agreed.
This looks. I saw something where Michael Saylor the other day was receiving sats through Lightning through his email. I thought, I mean, that's if we're going to go to sending sats as easy as sending an email, we're going to have adoption really take off over the next couple of years.
For those that might not know, a sat is the smallest increment of Bitcoin that you can buy. It's 7 zeros and a 1. Point 0.000001 is the smallest increment you get. It's like 3/1000ths of a penny at this point. Yeah, I'm with you. I think that these layer 2 networks on specific cryptos can really help scale those networks and allow them to get to the point of usability. I for one, have always joked that there's no way I'm going to buy an ice mocha frappuccino from Starbucks with Bitcoin because 10-minute block time may take 30 minutes to get finality on it. My coffee is already melted or it's cold. But if you have Lightning Network, you're talking just a couple seconds, and now all of a sudden it's a very attractive alternative. One of my goals is to go to El Salvador and go to Bitcoin City, which is a kind of a closed loop ecosystem where you pay for everything with Bitcoin. There's no need to go into another currency.
And
that's interesting.
Isn't that Bitcoin Beach?
Yeah.
Isn't there also a Bitcoin Beach there?
Yep.
Yeah, that would be exciting. But you know, I have to make a case right now. I don't want to spend my Bitcoin. I mean, I would do it to support the network for just a little bit, but I want to accumulate Bitcoin. I mean, I want to give up my fiat money is what I want to do,
Yep.
and get rid of the fiat. It's like Gresham's law. You ever heard? You remember Gresham's law?
No.
Thomas Gresham was an economist in the 1600s, and he coined a law. You can look it up in Google. Gresham's law, Thomas Gresham. It's bad money drives out of circulation good money. Well, in this particular case, the good money is Bitcoin, and you want to keep it and reuse it as your own personal reserve. And the bad money is the fiat money, whether it's a fiat euro or a fiat dollar or a fiat yen. You want to spend it for the incidental goods and services that you need. But this law was coined, and this is especially true when you got two fiat currencies circulating, like we had in 1964 with the silver dollar that had John Kennedy's image on it, that was 90% silver, and then we had a clad John Kennedy dollar issued that had no silver. It was nickel plated copper, and so you got two coins circulating of equal face value, but one has the intrinsic value of silver, and there is much less intrinsic value in copper and nickel.
Yeah.
And what happened was all the silver coins disappeared that were backed with silver. They were hoarded, but the Kennedy dollars or the quarters with George Washington on them continue to circulate today, and that was Thomas Gresham's law. Gresham's law. Bad money drives out of circulation good money.
Well,
and it's as true today as it was then.
I think Bitcoin is good money. Real quick, I see a discussion going on. And Brian is actually right that you may have some institutions that are hoarding Bitcoin. Of course, Michael Saylor is buying as much as he can get his hands on, but it is fully trackable, and you can see which addresses, who has how much Bitcoin. And I'm going to share this one with you guys just so you can see the clarity here. These are the biggest addresses out there, right? These are the biggest addresses in Bitcoin right now. The top wallet, you can click here and see everything that's ever happened to this wallet. It has $7 billion in it. Now, I'm watching kind of the discussion going on, and maybe governments have all the Bitcoin, and that may be, but a lot of these are tracked to different exchanges. And, you see the biggest wallet in the world has $7 billion worth of Bitcoin. Well, there is some diversification here, and maybe governments might have 2 or 3 of these addresses. So it's easy to track exactly where everything is, but I don't know if necessarily these are Bitcoin. I think I showed you this one the other day. If everyone here wants to feel good about themselves, I will show you one wallet address that is absolutely unbelievable. And I may have shown you this the other day. This wallet right here is worth $2.25 billion, and somebody deposited back in, the very first deposit was back in 2011. It was March 8th of 2011. Somebody deposited 80,000 Bitcoin into this address, and it has never moved. I'll show you what that was worth back at that date and time. Maybe it doesn't show me here. I'm scrolling through a lot of numbers here. I apologize because it goes by different, every time Bitcoin was added from mining to it. It was 79,956 Bitcoin were added to this address. It was worth $74,000 back in 2011. This is, for all intents and purposes, Bitcoin that will never be recovered. This is somebody who lost their private key, and this is gone forever. So when we talk about Bitcoin and scarcity, you're going to have situations like this where this 80,000 Bitcoin is now removed. You will never have 21 million Bitcoin. And the assumptions are that if it hasn't moved for 5 years or more, that it's lost, which means that at this point, there's 6 million Bitcoin that have been lost. So when we finally get to 2140, when Bitcoin is finally done mining, that means there will only be 15 million in circulation. And by the time we get to that point, more Bitcoin will be lost. So it's the scarcity point which drives up the value of Bitcoin. And I think that that's where John is making the point of, to him, it's real money. You can see it, you can track it, you know where it's at, you know who has what. They just may not have their private keys to it.
Well, it's all about supply and demand. I mean, there's no question that the demand is going to increase. Price is going to fluctuate like crazy, but that's okay. Price fluctuated like crazy for gold,
Yep.
like silver. I mean, silver used to be 50 cents an ounce.
Right.
I mean,
But here's the
so
thing, John, with
price change with, that's the nature.
and to Margaret's point, one of the reasons that people don't like crypto is its volatility. But if you have right now, and I can show you guys this over here. Let's scroll up here, and I'll go to the wallets page so you can see the number of wallets. Go, and I put this link in the chat for those of you who, it's a very interesting webpage. It's called BitInfo Charts. I love this one. But here's your distribution of Bitcoin. And you can see that there is only, there's 13,883 wallets that have between 100 and 1,000 Bitcoin. Obviously, that's a tremendous amount, but that's only 0.03%. I saw someone say, Merlin, show us where you are on this list. I am not in the top 100. That's for sure. I'm way down here, but I'm in between the 1 and 10 mark. So I'm 2.18% of the global population that holds Bitcoin.
Hey, but we can be aspirational, right?
We can't. No, my goal is to get to 10. I want to get to 10, and then I'll be in this small little fraction here. But the point I'm making is, this is why you have such volatility, because you have very few people around the world that are trading with Bitcoin that use it. If this gets to the point that it's now a globally used instrument, let's say it uses Lightning Network Layer 2, it's no longer that you will have a full Bitcoin. You're going to have 0.00001 Bitcoin, and some small amount that's going to be worth a lot of money because there's scarcity to it. So once you have more Bitcoin in the hands of more people, you distribute the ability for it to be manipulated very quickly. A whale, for example. If you're a whale in crypto, it means that you hold a ton. And if you have a whale, they can manipulate it. But if you spread it out across the globe, let's say India and Africa and Asia and Europe all start using Bitcoin, then you dilute the ownership of Bitcoin, and price stability will be a natural phenomenon based off of just the utility of it, meaning people using it. So now, very few people use it. It's got incredible volatility. But if we get adoption and more people use it, then that volatility is going to drop dramatically, and we'll find equilibrium and probably more stable than the dollar. Crazy.
Well, or it's more stable than many fiat currencies. Have you looked at the price volatility on the Venezuelan bolivar? Have you looked on the price volatility of some of these African currencies that have ridiculous monetary systems where they're grossly unbanked? And
here's the bolivar.
I mean, look at you. Want to talk about price volatility,
John? Back in March of 2022, the U.S. dollar to the bolivar was 4.18, and now it's at 24.
Well,
this is one of the best trends you're going to see all year.
I remember I have a price chart somewhere I could pull up between 1919 and 1923 during the Weimar Republic inflation in Germany, where in 1919 it took $4. Oh no, 4 German marks to the dollar. So a German mark was worth about 25 cents. Okay, by 1923. Do you know how many marks it took to buy a dollar by 1923?
I do actually, or I can see right here on the chart because TJ, the chart master, who's not here helping me, but I'm going to pretend he is. It was 100,000 million, but 1 trillion.
Yes, over 1 trillion Reichsmarks to the dollar. So it goes from 25 cents to the dollar.
Wow.
To 1 trillion to the dollar. Can you imagine what happened to the price of gold in Reichsmarks between that period of time? So you want to talk about price volatility. When you talk about price volatility, you must understand that we've got 160 plus countries in the world, and only a handful of them have a stable fiat currency system.
Right. Yep.
The rest of them are grossly, what do you think the price of a Bitcoin would be in Cuba right now? Or a price of a Bitcoin in North Korea? Or a price of a Bitcoin in some of these Western African countries where they have just grossly corrupt authoritarian regimes.
Right.
Okay. And so, when you're worried about price volatility, you're not looking at it on a global basis. You're only measuring it in dollars. Well, that's ridiculous. It's just ridiculous because Bitcoin is a global phenomenon.
Yeah, it is.
And it's going to radically improve the quality of life for people outside the United States more than people in the United States, because it's going to give them an alternative, a choice to a corrupt monetary system.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about it. I mean, so I think
we take it
people
for
need
granted, John, because you and me and everybody watching, everybody here has access to banking system and financial systems where, you
not
look
that
at
way in the rest of the world, is it?
no, remittances. It's crazy. People sending money back to people using Western Union to send money back to Mexico. I'm in California. We have a huge contingency of Mexican population here. A lot of them sending money back and forth. Western Union charged, the last time I looked it up, you could send $100 worth through Western Union. They charge you $25 to send it. It's like, I can send it through a million different crypto networks and pay a couple of cents. So it's definitely going to revolutionize payment networks. We could talk about FedNow another time. But I'm noticing the clock here. This might be the longest show that we've ever done. I'm trying to get the show down to 30 minutes, John. You're not helping.
and we just scratched the surface, Merlin. We can make a whole series on this. We're not done, folks. Come back for more.
I'm always down to discuss it. It's I'm not here to agree or disagree with John. It's just sharing ideas and understanding kind of what the future may hold for us. And I think we all agree that something's coming. It feels like there's a change happening as we speak, whether that ends up in tension globally or some amicable agreement on change in reserve currency. But digital assets, I think, have pushed this argument significantly. In the next couple of years, we'll see regulation, which may even push that argument further.
And let me end on this note, if you don't mind. Look, the dollar's out of our hands. There's nothing we're going to do about it. Right. This is not going to be determined by Biden or the next president or the president after that. It's going to be determined by the market. We're talking about $100 trillion marketplace. It's going to be determined by the market's demand. And if the U.S. dollar continues to lose credibility because some of the crazy things that it's doing in deficit spending, in printing money out of thin air, in causing all kinds of challenges, and this has been going on, by the way, since the 1950s, as far as I'm concerned. This isn't a Democrat versus Republican situation. It is what it is. We've been inflating that dollar since the 1950s with reckless abandon, and our kids are going to have to pay the piper. Yep. When you read that thing that the average person in America owes $94,000, I thought of my 4 grandchildren.
Yeah.
Think of my 4 grandchildren being $94,000 each in debt. That's almost $100,000 my grandchildren are in debt, and they've barely got out of the diapers.
Yeah.
I mean, that really is disgusting. But for your audience, I'd like them to think about this. Think about the Bitcoin and what's going on across the world, not what's going on here.
Yeah.
Okay, it's great that Fidelity has adopted it. It's great that maybe some central banks, a couple of institutions are going to start custodying it here. That's wonderful. And our pension plans will pick up 1-2% to add some beta to their portfolio. Fine. But think about what happens when this goes to all these other countries across the world. It's going to be fantastic for them. It's going to raise their standard of living.
Absolutely. John, there's a fantastic interview which I have talked to my viewers about in the past, and there's a guy named Lex Friedman on YouTube. He does a lot of great interviews. And he did one with Charles Hoskinson of Cardano, and I would encourage everybody to watch that one. It's just fantastic. Even if you don't like Cardano, that's fine, but listen to him speak about it. And he set the stage and says, listen, if you don't understand what crypto means to the world, understand what the internet did to the world. And we all know it because we're in developed countries. But, there was no way 30 years ago, there was no way that some kid in the middle of South Africa, is going to get a college degree. It wasn't going to happen. In these little tribal villages, how's he going to get to MIT? He's got no money, can't do it. The internet comes along, and all of a sudden, that kid in this remote village in South Africa or wherever you want in the world is now taking MIT classes. So intellectually, you're bringing up the global community through information, through knowledge. Yeah. Now YouTube is teaching everybody under the sun how to do all these different things. And, we take it for granted because I live in a very developed country. I have every amenity I could possibly want in the world. But I take it for granted because there's people out there that don't even have running water. They don't have internet. They don't have electricity. And as we start to bring this technology to the world, it brings everybody up, which makes us better and stronger as a global community. And then you start to see those financial systems start to build. And if the infrastructure is there for digital money to help facilitate that, now all of a sudden they have access to banking. And they don't necessarily need to have a bank in their country. They can use a bank that is fully digital. They can get insurance and all these financial products that you and I get. They don't have access to it. But digitally, through decentralized marketplaces and cryptocurrencies, digital assets, they can have access to it. To me, this is almost bigger than the internet to me. It's so early, it's going to take time to get there.
You know, I'm a big fan of Alex Epstein. I don't know if you listen to any of his podcasts or not, but I'm a big fan of his work. His most current book is called Fossil Future. He makes the case in his book, Merlin, there are 2 billion people on this planet that have less electricity on an annual basis than what you and I use to run our refrigerator.
That's crazy.
I want you to think about that.
That's nuts.
2 billion people that have less. So we have an electricity crisis across the world. They don't, in 2 billion people. Now, that's going to get fixed over time. You know, it'll be slow, but it's going to get fixed. But think about that. And, you know, we got to get out of this thinking about what's happening in the United States. This is a global phenomenon.
Yeah. Yep.
This is a global phenomenon. And that's ultimately going to determine how fast adoption takes place. Because look how fast adoption took place with the internet. I mean, there was a time, you remember, 14.9 bottoms. Is that what it was?
Oh, yeah, no, it was you got to go in multiples, right? So it was like a 14K bottom, a modem, and then 28. Yeah, I remember. Oof.
28, then a 56
and 128. Like yep.
And that's what's going to happen in adoption. It's going to go in waves, and maybe this 4-year cycle is what that is symptomatic of. It's in waves. Look where Bitcoin is today versus what, 2015? When I mean, you were the one that introduced me to Bitcoin. Was it around 2015? Is that when it was?
My first one was 2014, but I think I really started talking to you. I'm not sure if I told you about it in 2014 or in 2017. 2017 is where I really fell in the rabbit hole for crypto. And that was
it was around deep. 14 or 15, and I didn't pay much attention to it. I my concern was the government will never let this happen, and that was always my pushback. But the government has nothing to do with it now. That cat's out of the bag. I don't think they can put that cat back in the bag. It's going, and but thank God for that.
Yeah,
and
absolutely. John,
China's getting back into this.
What?
China's getting back into Bitcoin again.
Of course, because we're so stupid, we're pushing it out.
Yeah,
unbelievable.
We're pushing it away. Coinbase is opening up in the Bermuda. I understand.
If they talked to Brandon Andreessen and said, are you going to leave the United States? And he says everything's on the table. If they push him out, it'd be so dumb. I
just read a Twitter feed that he's opening up a futures exchange in Bermuda. And by the way, I'm about a 40-minute plane ride from Bermuda.
Nice. Well, I read a really funny, not a funny, but it's a very pointed tweet, which says, if the government and the Security and Exchange Commission allowed Coinbase to go public, then how can they just 2 years later say you're conducting an illegal activity?
Absolutely. They laid their business plan out in the S1. It's total full disclosure.
Yeah.
This is what we're going to do. Why did you sign off on it? It's ridiculous.
All right, John, I want to keep going. I really do, but an hour and 15-minute show. We're pushing the boundaries. Maybe we'll get John another week. Let's get John in a week or two and talk about. Maybe we just do a specific show on cryptocurrency. We can walk down that rabbit hole because you're kind of a Bitcoin maxi, and maybe I can convince you otherwise. But not convince you, but create some arguments.
It'll be a hard sell, but I'm open. It'll be a hard sell, but we'll see what happens. By the way. My birthday's coming up. I don't want you to send me anything expensive this year, okay?
Yeah, I won't, John. Don't worry about it.
You promise that?
Yeah.
You promise? Okay.
Promise. Tomorrow's your birthday.
Your audience can, take care of me, but I don't want you to send me any expensive this year.
I'll do my best. All right, John, thank you
buddy.
so much for coming on today. I really
Good
appreciate it. Happy birthday, and cheers to many more. I'll reach out to you maybe in a week or so, whenever you have some time. I haven't had many guests on the program, so just let me know what you when you want to come on the program. You're always welcome here to come and kibitz with us on the program. They all love you here as well, so good to have you.
That's cool. If you see Mike McMahon, tell him I said hello.
You got it. I'll bring him on too. Maybe we'll do it. Maybe we'll have a three-way conversation one of these days with Mike on the show.
We may have to censor that.
We're going to go 3 hours today, folks. All right, everybody. Well, thanks, John. I appreciate it. And happy birthday, my friend. Have a great weekend. I'll talk to you soon.
Same to you.
All right, take care. Guys, that was John O'Donnell, the longest show we've ever done. And we're not done because Margaret's like, I want to talk about Tesla. Okay, fine. I'll do it. Hey, by the way, Big Ed, thank you very much, my friend. I appreciate that. That was fun. It was interesting, especially to kind of bounce ideas off of John. And, I don't go into one of these sessions when I talk to somebody knowing I'm going to agree with everybody on all things. And I'm very quick to point out, no, I disagree with that point. And John and I, we've been friends for so long, we actually get along great together. So he doesn't get butthurt, and I don't either if he says, I think you're wrong on that. It's all about understanding things. And, the future is changing as we speak. So it's kind of exciting, whether that's going to be a new reserve currency, a digital currency, digital assets. It's interesting to see how it changes. So for Margaret, here you go. Just because you wanted this one, I will bring up the Tesla chart here. So as you guys know, I got executed on my Tesla. I'll probably get executed tomorrow on my Tesla, but TSLA. I saw a party question saying, well, why was it down so much today? Well, their earnings weren't stellar. They missed on a couple different things. And I think it's probably people maybe taking some profits here. I mean, I can't say to exactly why that happened. I don't think it's because of the failed launch that happened today. I don't know if you guys saw that one. The Starship blew up. And it's funny, I have friends who are like, Elon Musk's stupid. What a waste of money. His rocket blew up. He's an idiot. It's like, you realize that it's the biggest thing ever launched into space. Bigger than anything that's ever been launched by any government around the world. Nothing this big has been shot into space ever. And it blew up, right? It didn't decouple one of the things. Bravo for Elon Musk, because you know what? He's going to try it again and again and again and again until he gets it. And ultimately, this will probably take us to the moon or to Mars. Hopefully, in my lifetime, I'll get to see somebody land foot on Mars, which would be absolutely phenomenal. So, somebody told me that that's why Tesla tanked today is because of the blow-up missile. I don't know. I don't think so. Not necessarily. Will you get executed? That's true, Big Ed. It might bounce tomorrow. I mean, if you look right where we're at, it's really right at the bottom end of that yellow box, right? So it could very easily bounce up tomorrow. But right now, there's a little bit of pessimism going on with Tesla, at least from the earnings announcement. I'm fine with it. We'll figure out on Monday if I get executed, and I'll share that with you guys, kind of what's going on there and what I will ultimately do with that specific trade and how my trade will pan out. And we'll see. If it doesn't, if it stays below my strike price, great. I'll own it and I'll sell calls against it. But I'm okay owning Tesla for the long haul. I think we're going to do pretty good. Falcon rockets used to blow up. Look at them now. Yeah, right? Exactly. It's incredible. It's 120 meters, I think 125 meters. So that's a massive. Not only is it 400 feet tall, people, 400 plus feet, but it's also like 29 feet wide. I mean, this thing is an unbelievably large rocket. So bravo, Elon Musk. Cheers to you. I hope you keep doing it. Larry says the Astro Spruce Goose. Yeah, I agree. That is a monstrosity that people are just laughing at. But at some point, we will get there. We will get there at some point. All right. That's going to do it for me, guys. I didn't look at earnings or markets or anything else. I'm way beyond due. As you guys may know, no show tomorrow because I will be on my way to Los Angeles going to the Fish concerts for 3 nights in a row, which is a vacation of sorts for me. Plus, I got a whole bunch of other things I need to do for tomorrow as well. So, no show tomorrow. I hope you guys enjoyed John O'Donnell today. If you did, awesome. Give me a thumbs up on there. Share it with anybody you think might be in the discussion of we're losing reserve currency status. What might replace that? Again, no one knows the answer. Time will tell what ultimately happens, but maybe we can start looking at ways to position ourselves for that inevitability. I think gold, I think silver, I think commodities, hard, physical, tangible assets, and things like Bitcoin as well might be a way to hedge on that potential swapping of reserve currencies. That said, I hope you guys have a fantastic remainder of your evening. Have a great night there, Shinobi. I know it's in the UK and it's late for you. It's it's 3 o'clock here. It's like 11:20 for you right now. So sleep well, my friend. For the rest of you, go do something fun. Les, thank you so much. And Big Ed, thank you for the contributions. I do appreciate that. You guys have a fantastic weekend. Do something fun. I will see you on Monday. Take care.